The United States holds its midterm elections as Republicans and Democrats push for control of the Senate and the House of Representatives. In Nicaragua, citizens hold caravans to celebrate the results of the municipal elections. High-level meetings between heads of states and government continue on Tuesday in Sharm el-Sheikh within the framework of the United Nations Climate Conference in Egypt. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In the United States, midterm elections move forward where voters decide which party will have control over both houses of Congress. Citizens continue to go to the polls to renew 35 seats in the Senate, 435 seats in the House of Representatives, as well as 36 governors and mayors. More than 44 million U.S. citizens cast their ballots early. However, studies point to a high level of abstention during this election day. On the other hand, several sectors are in disagreement with President Joe Biden's management. According to polls, Republicans are favorites to obtain the majority in the House of Representatives, while Democrats are trying to maintain control of the seats in both houses of Congress. Let us now review the general outlines of this Tuesday's elections.
Midterm elections in the United States are general elections held every 2 years in November, coinciding with the presidential midterm. Voters elect all the representatives to the National Congress for a 2-year term and 1/3 of the senators for a 6-year term. Although this vote has much less media exposure, it has an important political impact, not only because it serves as a measure of the acceptance of the incumbent president, but also because, by renewing the Congress, it may compromise the executive's ability to carry out its government agenda. On this occasion, Democrat President Joe Biden has a modest majority in both houses. And the leaders of the Republican Party have stated that if they are favored, they will push for congressional investigations into cases such as that of Hunter Biden, son of the president accused of money laundering, the management of the migratory crisis, and the withdrawal of the U.S. troops from Afghanistan, among other topics. 538 opinion poll surveys indicate that the Republicans could take control of the House of Representatives, while the Democrats have a good chance of retaining the Senate chamber. In this scenario, President Biden will have to conclude his term by means of executive orders, legal alternatives of the executive with the force of law, for the management of internal and government affairs. It is estimated that the most influential issues in voters' decision will be inflation, gun violence, abortion rights, the coronavirus pandemic, and the assault on the Capitol on January 6, 2021.
In the United States, authorities report that the massive fire at a chemical plant in Georgia has been brought under control. According to local authorities, a total of 3 explosions occurred this Monday in the plant, and their chemical source was the hydrogen peroxide manufactured in that facility. This event led to the evacuation of approximately 100 surrounding homes, primarily due to the potential dangers of smoke and possible further explosions. However, the evacuation order was later lifted after firefighters said they had the situation under control and residents returned to their homes on Monday night. For the time being, authorities are advancing in the investigations to clarify this event, the causes of which are still unknown. In Nicaragua, citizens hold caravans to celebrate the results of the municipal elections. According to local media, thousands of supporters of the Sandinista National Liberation Front mobilized to celebrate the electoral triumph of the Nicaragua United Alliance after winning the majorities of the 153 municipalities of the country. The Nicaraguan Supreme Electoral Council affirmed that the Sandinista Front won by obtaining 73.70%, equivalent to 1,494,688 votes of the 2,028,035 valid votes. The electoral body also added that it was a very civic, organized, and democratic process, and at the same time the reactions continue in favor of working for the common good of Nicaragua. In El Salvador, social organizations and relatives of those deprived of liberty gathered at the Attorney General's office to defend human rights. In addition, protesters demanded the authorities to intercede for the release of innocent people who were detained during the state of emergency. According to the government, about 57,000 people have been detained under suspicion of belonging or collaborating with gangs. For their part, social leaders claim that the state of emergency detains people who do not have criminal records or are not linked to gangs. Bolivia's President Luis Arce will present his administration's report before the Legislative Assembly on Tuesday, 2 years after his inauguration. On early Tuesday, there was a parade by social organizations held at the Murillo Square, which is a symbol of the government and legislative capital of the plurinational state, and later was held an ancestral ceremony. The Bolivian president will go to the site of parliament to report before deputies and senators about his administration's performance in national economy, social indicators, and other achievements of his administration, which have been acknowledged by international organizations. A flight from Caracas landed at El Dorado Airport in Bogota, Colombia, which was the first time in 3 years after the closure of the border between Venezuela and Colombia. The 36 passengers were received by Colombian Minister of Transport Guillermo Reyes, the Minister of Commerce, Industry and Tourism Germán Humana, as well as Venezuelan Ambassador to Colombia Felix Plasencia. The Minister of Transport added on his Twitter account that there is great cooperation between both nations now, and as relations improve, it has been possible to return to regular air operations. The official announced that in the coming days, flights from Colombia to Venezuela will begin as well.
Everyone has asked us when the airspace between Colombia and Venezuela will be open, and today is the day. As we speak, a plane of Turpil Airline has landed in Colombia, thus reopening the skies between our two countries.
The Colombian Transportation Minister announced that a group of Colombian citizens will be arriving in Venezuela this Wednesday on an aircraft belonging to Satena Airline as part of the resumption of binational air passenger traffic operations.
This Wednesday, for the first time in our history, in the history of Satena, this airline will fly with 45 citizens from Colombia and Venezuela, departing from Bogota to the Maiquetía Airport, which serves Caracas. This will be a demonstration of the full resumption of air operations.
We're going to take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at the account at teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. High-level meetings between heads of state and government continue on Tuesday in Sharm el-Sheikh within the framework of the United Nations Climate Conference in Egypt. Outstanding debts with developing countries will be the focus of the debates. A year ago, rich nations agreed to transfer $100 billion a year to developing countries. The money was never allocated, and in the few cases it did, it was granted as a loan. The attitude of the major world powers has been harshly criticized at the beginning of COP27 and in previous events. During the second day of debates, issues like the world crisis, inflation, and the pandemic will be at the center. Statements by the leaders of the Amazon countries are of particular interest. In the framework of the COP27 Climate Summit, the President of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, greeted the U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry, and met with South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa. President Maduro continues his visit to Egypt as part of his participation in this summit, in which he has talked with several of his counterparts and representatives of governments of countries of the world. In spite of the tensions between the government of the United States and Venezuela, the Venezuelan president approached former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. In the framework of this climate event, Maduro also held a meeting with his South African counterpart, Cyril Ramaphosa, to strengthen the bilateral ties between both nations. Venezuela and South Africa maintain a solid cooperation aimed at strengthening trade, mining, oil, agriculture, and tourism. The Venezuelan head of state also held a trilateral meeting with the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, and the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, Philip Davis. During the meeting, the leaders reviewed the progress made in the alliance with Venezuela and discussed joint contributions that could be made in the near future to face the climate crisis. The President of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, also participated in a high-level regional meeting with Presidents Gustavo Petro of Colombia and Chan Santotegui of Suriname. The three presidents led the discussion of the Amazon as a pillar of climate balance and life at the COP27 Climate Summit and applauded the initiative to defend the climate and particularly the Amazon rainforest. The President of Suriname recalled that his country, together with Colombia and Venezuela, are carbon-negative countries. However, he pointed out that these nations are concerned about the defense of the Amazon. The President of Venezuela assured that the recovery of the Amazon is an important issue in the life of the continent and of humanity. For his part, President Petro pointed out that the Amazon requires at least 2 decades of contributions to be recovered. During his speech at the United Nations COP27 Climate Summit, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa criticized international funders for making it difficult for poorer nations to access aid to fight climate change.
Funding institutions need to transform and change the way in which they fund projects that will enable us to develop with regard to climate change. We need a clear roadmap to deliver on the Glasgow decision to double adaptation financing by 2025. Our emphasis must be on the health, well-being, and food and water security of the most vulnerable people in the world. We are already scaling up investment in renewable energy and are on a course to retire a number of aging coal-fired power stations.
China launched a bamboo instead of plastic initiative with International Bamboo and Rattan Organization to lead the world in formulating a global action plan that pushes for using bamboo to replace some non-biodegradable plastics. The initiative proposed to deepen cooperation on leveraging bamboo's advantages in reducing soil and air pollution by replacing plastic products, has offered a nature-based solution for high-energy consuming production for the world. Bamboo is a renewable green resource which can be out into sustainable use once cultivated, and it also has other ecological values such as water conservation, preventing water leakage and oil erosion, as well as purifying the air.
By using shampoo instead of plastic, the negative impact of microplastic on human body and ecological environment can be alleviated. According to statistics, of the 9 billion tons of plastic product produced worldwide, only 9% is recycled, 12% of them is incinerated, and the remaining 79% ends up in landfills or flows into the natural environment. Therefore, it is urgent to reduce plastic pollution.
In Italy, the situation between the boats transporting migrants and the authorities continues to worsen. The current government's refusal to let the migrants disembark, except for those the authorities have described as vulnerable, complicates the already difficult conditions of sacrifice and stress they suffer on the boats. Some officials have warned of the desperate conditions of the 250 other migrants still trapped aboard 2 charity boats in the port of Catania.
We have encountered situations of psychological fragility and vulnerability, which led 3 people to jump into the sea, and then 1 to go back on board, while the other 2 spent the night here. And also a series of infections as confirmed by the ship's doctor, an infection that could be scabies. Yesterday and last night we called again for a new medical reassessment, and the police have now confirmed to me that this evaluation is on the way.
We have more news coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. On Tuesday, foreign ministers of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, and his Indian counterpart, Subrahmanyam Jaishankar, gave a joint press conference following bilateral talks in Moscow. The two countries members of BRICS discussed the prospects for military technical cooperation, including satellite navigation, science, and manned missions. Lavrov also gave an update to Jai Shankar about the special military operation in Ukraine, in which trade between Russia and India has grown substantially since February, where Lavrov has a high opinion of his Indian friends about the neutral stance position on the situation.
We discussed in detail the status and prospects for military technical cooperation, including joint production of modern forms of weaponry. We put a large emphasis on space in such areas as satellite navigation, space science, and manned missions.
Iranian border guards seized some 600 war weapons after dismantling several smuggling gangs, trafficking arms and ammunition in the provinces of Sistan and Baluchistan. Border Guard Commander General Ahmad Ali Gudarsi said the confiscated arsenal represents a 26% increase over last year. The 600 weapons were discovered in a deployment in southeast Iran in the last 45 days to dismantle several gangs. Moreover, significant quantities of U.S.-made war and hunting ammunition of different brands and calibers were seized on the province's border with eastern Azerbaijan. On Tuesday, China and Algeria have signed a second bilateral strategic cooperation plan to set the course for bilateral trade and relations for the next 5 years. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian made the announcement at a press briefing in Beijing. The agreement was signed by Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi and by Algerian Foreign Affairs Minister Ramtan Lamamra. China and Algeria signed their first strategic agreement back in 2014, aiming to further tap the potential of bilateral cooperation and push for the development of a comprehensive strategic partnership.
Taking the implementation of the 5-year plan as an opportunity, China is willing to work with Algeria to consolidate the traditional friendship, strengthen the aligning of development strategies, and jointly promote the building of a community with a shared future for mankind.
Avoiding the next presidential session and under an interim government, Lebanon is currently weathering the effects of the economic, financial, and social crisis, which is complicating the living conditions of its citizens. From Beirut, our correspondent reports further.
Around 2.2 million people in Lebanon need urgent support to ensure access to food and other basic needs. The country's financial collapse, the devaluation of the currency, the deterioration of the national industry, and the high rates of food and raw material imports exacerbated the social crisis.
Lebanon imports annually about $1.5 billion in food, being a country rich in water and therefore has the possibility of having a good agriculture, and a country with good agriculture can have a good food industry.
In view of this situation, apple exports to Jordan began in mid-October, and cooperation strategies with Syria and Iraq opened up a possibility to facilitate the flow of products, advance integration, and find a solution to the growing food crisis.
How do we encourage the importation of apples when we have a surplus of apples, and import potatoes when we have a surplus of potatoes? Then we need a plan and a vision to improve the farmer's conditions and give him viability as a result of his work to continue to provide us with the production of his crops.
In the current year, the supply of wheat for the industry tightened the crisis and demanded that the agricultural authorities stimulate domestic production by purchasing their crops and facilitating the procurement of the seeds for the coming planting season.
This measure only represents a first step in order to contribute 10 to 12% of the national product. With this, we will be taking burden to the Lebanese state that imports at least $200 million in wheat. Supporting the industry will drastically reduce imports and create a broad financial circuit with job opportunities. It will also establish the Lebanese on the land where they produce, sell and export to get the dollar from abroad. But what happened was the opposite, and Lebanon today imports everything it consumes.
High prices for fuel, electricity, and food are complicating the living conditions of the Lebanese, who face a political emptiness and are struggling with the functioning of an interim government.
Desde Beirut fue un reporte de Leslie Alonso, teleSUR.
And we have come to the end of this news brief, where you can find these and many other stories on our website telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For teleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.